Good morning or good afternoon, football fans. Big Al here on this Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, and welcome in to week number 5 of the week that was, where I've read off all the statistical numbers from all 14 games from this past week in the National Football League. And stick around till the end for my week 6 power rankings. Coming up in this edition, the Chicago Bears end their 14-game losing streak in style by beating up the Commanders on Thursday night. Trevor Lawrence and the Bills knock off Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars knock off Josh Allen's Bills across the pond. The 49ers dominate the Cowboys, more like dominate and expose, in a big Sunday night showdown. The Steelers still won at home from the Baltimore Ravens. And the New York Jets used their ground attack to knock down the Broncos in Denver. So as always, we'll start off with Thursday Night Football. As this week, it was the Chicago Bears beating the Washington Commanders 24-20, or rather 40-20. As Chicago wins for the first time since October 24th of last season, ending a 14-game losing streak. So the Bears are now 1-4. They will host the Minnesota Vikings back at Soldier Field on Sunday, while the Commanders drop to 2-3, and they'll face Desmond Ridder and the Falcons down in Atlanta this week. Let's start off with the offenses. First, the Chicago Bears ran 61 plays for 451 yards, averaging 7.39 yards per play. 29 passes for 273, averaging 9.41, and 32 rushes for 178, averaging 5.56. The Bears have 18 first downs, which gives them 91 in 5 games. They finished 7 of 15 on third downs Thursday night for 46.7%. And on the season, they're right at 40%, 26 of 65. Chicago went 1 for 1 on fourth down, which makes them 4 for 8 on fourth down this year. The Bears had just 3 penalties for 35 yards at 31 through 5 games for 247. Time of possession was 30 minutes and 4 seconds. After 5 weeks, the Bears After 5 weeks, the Bears' offense is averaging 334.4 yards per game, 203.6 yards per game passing, and 130.8 yards per game rushing. They've scored 115 points, which is an average of 23 points per game. The Washington Commanders ran 61 plays as well for 388 yards, averaging 6.36 yards per play. 51 passes for 359, averaging 7.04, and only 10 rushes for 29 yards, which is a 2.9 average. The Commanders had more first downs than the Bears, 23 versus Chicago's 18. The 23 first downs on Thursday gives Washington 111 for the year. They finished 6 of 12 on third down for 50%, and on the season, they're 22 of 60 for 36.7%. They were 0 for 1 on fourth down on Thursday night and 3 for 5 for the year. Washington had just 1 penalty for 5 yards and 26 through 5 games for 201. Time of possession was 29 minutes and 56 seconds. Through 5 games, the Commanders' offense averages 323.8 yards per game, 232.8 yards per game passing, and 91 yards per game rushing. The Commanders have scored 109 points in 5 games, averaging 21.8 points per game. All right, the Bears defense had 36 tackles and 208 through the first 5 games. They would record 5 sacks on Sam Howell on Thursday night, bringing their season total to 7. They had a forced fumble in the game, their third of the season, and 5 passes defense. That brings them up to 15. They added their 3rd interception of the season, and they've yet to score a defensive touchdown. The Bears' defense in 5 games has allowed 384.2 yards per game, 286 yards passing, and 98.2 yards rushing. They've allowed 157 points, which is 31.4 points per game, and their point differential through 5 weeks is minus 42. The Commanders' defense records 36 tackles, bringing them up to 211. They would sack Justin Fields 3 times, bringing their season total to 16. They also had a forced fumble in the game, their 5th. They had 4 passes defense, bringing them up to 22. No interceptions this week, but they have 2 from earlier and no defensive touchdowns. Washington's defense has allowed 372.2 yards per game, 238.6 passing, and 133.6 rushing. Washington has allowed 160 points, which is 32 points per game, and their point differential through 5 games is minus 51. Closing line was Washington minus 6, over under was 45. The total was 60 points overall, so this shot over the 45. The 2 teams combined for 839 yards and 122 plays, averaging 6.88 yards per offensive play. I took the Commanders both straight up and against the spread in this one, and I'll tell you how I fared in my straight up and ATS picks at the end of the rundown, so stay tuned. Now we come to London, and the first game on Sunday, seeing the Jacksonville Jaguars knock off the Buffalo Bills 25-20. Both teams will return home in week number 6. The Jaguars will host Indianapolis, while the Bills will host Sunday Night Football against the New York Giants. Both teams are 3-2. Starting off with the Jaguars offense, 78 plays for 474, averaging 6.08. 37 passes for 278, averaging 7.51. And 41 rushes for 196, averaging 4.78. The Jaguars offense had 29 first downs in this game and 105 in the first 5 weeks. They were an impressive 10 of 18 on third down for 55.6%, and on the season, they're 26 of 69 for 37.7%. Jacksonville's offense had no fourth down plays, so they remained 2 for 7 on the season. The Jaguars had 8 penalties for 56 yards and 23 total for 185. Time of possession is 38 minutes and 12 seconds. This will put Jacksonville in ball hawk territory. Now, if you're new here, a ball hawk is a team that possesses the ball for at least 35 minutes in a game, win or lose. Through 5 weeks, the Jaguars offense is now averaging 358.2 yards per game, 239 yards per game passing, and 119.2 yards per game rushing. They've scored 105 points, which is 21 points per game. As for the Buffalo Bills offense, who put up 48 points on the Dolphins last week, they ran 54 plays for 388, averaging 7.19 yards per play. 40 passes for 359, averaging 8.98, so nearly 9 yards on average through the air, just about. But they were limited to 29 yards on 14 rushes, which is a 2.07 average. Buffalo had 18 first downs in this game. That brings them up to 110. They were 5 for 12 on third down for 41.7%. And on the season, 31 of 63 for 49.2%. There were no fourth down plays for the Bills either, so they remained 3 for 5 on the season. Buffalo had 11 penalties for 109 yards, and so far this year, they have 30 flags for 244. Time of possessions, 21 minutes and 48 seconds. The Buffalo Bills offense in 5 games is averaging 390.4 yards per game, 274.2 yards per game passing, and 116.2 yards per game rushing. The Bills are one of the highest scoring teams in football. They're averaging 31.8 points while scoring 159 points in 5 games. The Jaguars defense records 34 tackles, bringing their season total up to 207. They had no sacks in this game, so they remain at 9. They added a forced fumble in the game. That's their 6th of the season. Only 2 passes defensed in this game, bringing them to 26. So they are still among the league leaders in this category. They had an interception in this game. It's their 5th of 2023. And no defensive touchdowns against Buffalo. They have 1 yards per game rushing. The Jaguars have allowed 102 points in 5 games, which is 20.4 points per game. Point differential is +3. As for the Bills defense, they record 60 tackles, bringing their season total to 204. They would sack Trevor Lawrence 5 times, bringing their sack total to 21, and I think this leads all of football now. They had 3 forced fumbles in this game. That brings them all the way to 8. And 7 passes defense brings them to 25. No interceptions or defensive touchdowns in this game for the Bills, but they do have 8 interceptions and 1 defensive score this year. In 5 games, the Bills' defense is allowing 325.2 yards per game, 191.2 yards per game passing, and 134 yards per game rushing. They've allowed 80 points in 5 games, including the 25 on Sunday to Jacksonville. Their average is 16 points per game, and their point differential is +79. Closing line is Buffalo -5. Over-under is 48.5. The 2 teams barely missed the total by a handful as they combined for 45 points, 862 yards, and 132 plays, averaging 6.53 yards per play. I took the Bills both straight up and against the spread. All right. Now to the first of 6 1:00 kickoffs on Sunday. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who were dominated for about 57.5 minutes, came back in the final moments and defeated the arch rival Baltimore Ravens 17-10. The 2 teams are now tied atop the AFC North at 3-2. Pittsburgh is off this week. We'll see them again on October 22nd when they face the Rams in LA. While the Ravens are off to London to face the Tennessee Titans, and they're designated as the road team in this game. We'll start with the Steelers offense, who ran 62 plays for 289, averaging 4.66 yards per play. 32 passes for 202, averaging 6.31, and 30 rushes for 87, averaging 2.9. Pittsburgh had 17 first downs, which brings their season total to 70 in 5 games. That's 14 per game. They were 6 of 15 on third down for 40%, and on the season, 27 of 73 for 37%. No fourth down plays for the Steelers offense. They remain 1 for 2 on the season. The Steelers had 3 penalties for 30 yards and 22 total penalties in 5 games for 204 yards. Time of possession is 29 minutes and 46 seconds. The 2023 Steelers offense in 5 games is averaging 268.2 yards per game, 187.8 yards per game passing, and just 80.4 yards per game rushing. The Steelers have scored 79 points in 5 weeks. That's an average of 15.8 points per game. The Ravens offense ran 63 plays for 335, averaging 5.32 yards per play. 38 passes for 210, averaging 5.53. And 25 rushes for 125, which is an even 5 yards per run. Baltimore at 19 first downs, which brings their season total to 99. They were 5 of 14 on third down for 35.7%. And so far this year, 31 of 74 for 41.9%. They went 0 for 2 on fourth down in this game. And for the season, they're now 1 for 4. Baltimore had 2 penalties for 20 yards. So this was a pretty clean game on both sides. The Ravens now have 30 penalties for 279. Time of possession is in Baltimore's favor at 30 minutes and 14 seconds. Ravens offense in 5 games is averaging 335 yards per game, 189 yards per game passing, and 146 yards per game rushing. They've scored 109 points, which is 21.8 points per game. The Steelers defense records 45 tackles, bringing them to 240. They had 4 sacks on Lamar Jackson, bringing their season total to 17. They had 4 forced fumbles in this game. They're all the way up to 12 now in that category. And 6 passes defensed, bringing them to 29. No defensive touchdowns in this game. They have 2 of them from earlier this year, but they did add another interception against the Ravens. That's now 5 for the Steeler defense, who in 5 games is averaging 389.4 yards per game allowed, 245.6 yards per game passing, and 143.8 yards rushing per game. Steelers have allowed 110 points, which is 22 points per game. Their point differential through 5 weeks is minus 31. The Ravens defense records 38 tackles. They're up to 217 in this category. They would sack Kenny Pickett 3 times. Their sack total is now at 16. 1 forced fumble in the game. That's their 3rd of the season. 5 passes defensed in this game. They're now up to 30. They had no interceptions or touchdowns in this game, but they do have 4 INTs from earlier this year. Ravens defense in 5 games has allowed 266.4 yards per game, 175 yards passing per game, and 91.4 yards rushing per game. The Ravens have allowed 75 points, which is 15 points per game. Their point differential is plus 34. Closing line was Baltimore minus 5, over-under is 38.5. The 2 teams combined for just 27 points, 624 yards, and 125 plays, averaging just a tick below 5 yards per play at 4.99. The 27 points, by the way, finished under Vegas's projected total of 38.5. I took the Ravens straight up, but I picked the Steelers ATS. And again, I'll tell you the results of my picks at the end of this rundown. Next up, the Detroit Lions, proving that they're the superior kitty as they blow away the Carolina Panthers 42-24. At 4-1, the Detroit Lions are off to their best start since 2017. And next up, they're off to Tampa Bay to face Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. The Carolina Panthers are now the league's lone winless team at 0-5, and they're headed to Florida themselves for a showdown with Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. All right, let's start off with the Lions offense, which ran 58 plays for 377 yards, averaging 6.5 yards per play. 28 passes for 218, averaging 7.79, and 30 rushes for 159, averaging 5.3. The Lions offense had 23 first downs and 110 through 5 games. They finished 4 of 10 on third down for 40%, and on the season, they're now 26 of 66 for 39.4%. The Lions went 1 for 2 on fourth down, and on the season, they're 5 for 10, both at 50%. Detroit had 5 penalties for 35 yards and 31 total for 311. Time of possession is 31 minutes and 15 seconds. The Carolina Panthers offense ran 64 plays for 342, averaging 5.34 yards per play. 41 passes for 243, averaging 5.93, and 23 rushes for 99, averaging 4.3. The Panthers had 26 first downs and 103 through 5 games. They were 50% on third down, 5 out of 10. On the season, they're 29 of 71 for 40.8%. They went 1 for 1 on fourth down, and on the season, they're also at 50%, 4 out of 8. Carolina had 7 penalties for 45 yards, and in 5 games, they have 36 for 284. Time of possession is 28 minutes and 45 seconds. 1 second. In 5 games, the Panthers' offense is averaging 294.4 yards per game, 198.4 yards per game passing, and 96 yards per game rushing. The Panthers have scored 91 points, averaging 18.2 points per game. The Detroit defense records 43 tackles and 220 through 5 games. Only 1 sack in this game for the Lions D. This gives them 14. 1 forced fumble in the game is their 4th of the season, and 3 passes defense brings them up to 23. The Lions had 2 interceptions from their defense this week, bringing them up to 5, and no defensive touchdowns. They do have 1 from earlier this year. Lions defense playing very well. In 5 weeks, they've allowed 292.8 yards per game, 224.4 yards passing, and 68.4 yards rushing. The Lions defense has allowed 107 points, which is 21.4 points per game. Their point differential through 5 weeks is plus 41. The Panthers defense records 34 tackles, bringing them up to 202. They had 2 sacks in the game. That brings them to 14 as well. They still have 1 forced fumble in 2023. They didn't record 1 on Sunday. And 0 passes defense as well. They stay at 17. They had no interceptions or touchdowns from their defense either. So they still have 4 interceptions and 1 touchdown from earlier. The Panthers defense has allowed 325.8 yards per game. Good, not great. 185 yards passing and 140.8 yards rushing. Carolina has allowed 144 points, which is 28.8 points per game. Their point differential through 5 games is minus 53. Closing line was Detroit, minus 9, over under 43.5. And this ended up being the highest scoring game of the week as the two teams combined to score 66 points with 719 yards of offense and 122 plays, averaging 5.89 yards per play. I picked Detroit both straight up and against the spread. Moving on to the Houston Texans at the Atlanta Falcons, and Desmond Ritter continues to be unbeaten in home games in his football playing career. Whether it's high school, college, or in the NFL, he has not lost a home game, as Atlanta takes this one 21-19. Next week, the Falcons will host the Washington Commanders, while the Texans return home to play the New Orleans Saints. And I'll tell you about their game with the Patriots after this one. Atlanta is now 3-2 on the season, while Houston is 2-3. The Falcons offense ran 74 plays for 447 yards, averaging 6.04 yards per play. 38 passes for 351, averaging 9.24, and 36 rushes for just 96 yards, averaging 2.67. The Falcons had 26 first downs and 99 through 5 games. They were 7 of 14 on third down for 50%, 25 of 65 for the season at 38.5%. No fourth downs for the Falcons offense. They remained 3 of 6 in that category. Atlanta had 7 penalties for 55 yards and 26 total for 282. Time of possession is 35 minutes, 32 seconds. This puts Atlanta in ball hawk territory. The Falcons offense in 5 games is averaging 316.8 yards per game, 195.2 yards passing, and 121.6 yards rushing. They've scored 83 points in 5 games. Their average is 16.6 points per game. The Texans offense ran 58 plays for 313, averaging 5.4 yards per play. 35 passes for 249, averaging 7.11, 23 rushes for 64 yards, averaging 2.78. So looking at those numbers, neither team ran the ball all that well. The Texans had 17 first downs and 98 through 5 games. They were 4 of 13 on third down for 30.8%, and 35 of 77 for the season for 45.5%. No fourth down plays for the Texans offense either. They remained 3 for 7. Houston had 5 penalties for 25 yards and 33 through 5 games for 271. Time of possession, 24 minutes and 28 seconds. The Texans offense in 5 games is averaging 357.4 yards per game, 274.8 yards passing, and 82.6 yards rushing. The Texans offense has scored 115 points, which is 23 points per game. Now to the Falcons defense, who records 38 tackles, 184 through 5 games. They had no sacks or forced fumbles in this game. So the Falcons defense still has 5 sacks and 3 forced fumbles from earlier games. They had 3 passes defense, bringing them to 16, with no interceptions or touchdowns. They have 3 INTs. They have 3 INTs from earlier this year. Falcons defense in 5 games, only allowing 295.2 yards per game. So like the Lions, they're playing extremely well. 190.8 yards per game passing and 104.4 yards per game rushing. Falcons defense has allowed 96 points, which is 19.2 points per game. Point differential in 5 weeks is minus 13. As for the Texans defense, they recorded 56 tackles and 223 in 5 games. They had no sacks either, which keeps them at 6. They would force 2 fumbles in the game, numbers 6 and 7 on the season. 3 passes defense brings their season total to 15. With no interceptions or touchdowns against the Falcons, they have 3 INTs and 1 defensive score so far this year. Texans defense in 5 games is averaging 338.8 yards per game, 226.4 yards per game passing, and 112.4 yards per game rushing. Houston has allowed an even 100 points, which is 20 points per game. Their point differential in 5 games is plus 15. Closing line was Atlanta minus 2.5. Over under was 42. The 2 teams missed the total by a couple points as they combined for 40 points, 760 yards, and 132 plays, averaging 5.76 yards per play. I took the Falcons straight up and against the spread. And I can tell you with confidence that I won one of those picks and lost the other. Now let's talk about the Falcons' NFC South rivals, the New Orleans Saints, who marched into Foxborough and trampled the New England Patriots 34-0. And it's been a rough couple of games for Bill Belichick's Patriots, as the Cowboys and Saints have combined to outscore New England 72-3 in those 2 games. The Saints are now 3-2, and they're going to face the aforementioned Texans in Houston on Sunday, while the now 1-4 Patriots are off to Sin City to face Jimmy G and the Las Vegas Raiders. Starting with the Saints offense, they ran 68 plays for 304 yards, averaging 4.47 yards per play. 26 passes for 168, averaging 6.46. And 42 rushes for 136, averaging 3.24. New Orleans had 17 first downs and 86 through 5 games. They were 5 of 15 on third down for 33.3%. On the season, 28 of 75 for 37.3%. No fourth down plays for the Saints offense. They stayed 2 of 3 in this category. But they were hit with the penalty flags hard. They had 12 flags for 86 yards. And 36 total for 323 through 5 weeks. Time of possession is 39 minutes and 34 seconds. This makes the Saints ball hawks. The New Orleans offense in 5 games averaging just 273 yards per game, 191.8 yards passing, 97.2 yards rushing. The Saints have scored 96 points, averaging 19.2 points per game. As for the Patriots offense, well, it was non-existent once again. 49 plays for only 156 yards. That's 3.18 yards per play. 31 passes for 111 yards, which is 3.58 yards per pass. And 18 rushes for 45 yards, which is just 2.5 yards per run. The Patriots had 8 first downs in this game. That's all. 8. And 82 through 5 games. New England was very bad on third down, to the tune of 1 for 14, 7.1%. That's it. They are now 25 of 76 on third down in 5 weeks at 32.9%. They went 0 for 2 on fourth down, which makes them 2 for 10. So if you look at late down situations for the New England Patriots, they were 6.3%, 1 for 16. That's not good. You won't win too many games in this league doing that. New England had 5 penalties for 30 yards and 29 total for 218. Time of possession, only 20 minutes and 26 seconds. The New England offense in 5 weeks, only 287.4 yards per game. 203.6 yards passing and 83.8 yards rushing. Patriots offense has scored 55 points in 5 games. That equals out to 11 points per game. The Saints defense records 30 tackles and 178 through 5 weeks. 2 sacks in the game brings them to 11. They had no forced fumbles. They only have the one from earlier this season. But they did have 9 passes defense in this game. They're up to 38. They added 2 interceptions and a defensive touchdown in the game. So far this year, the Saints defense has 7 INTs and their first defensive score. Saints defense in 5 games averages 274.6 yards per game, 183 yards passing, and 91.6 yards rushing. They've allowed just 76 points in 5 games, rather. Their average is 15.2 points per game. Their point differential through 5 games is plus 20. As for the Patriots defense, 48 tackles in this game, 219 in the first 5 weeks. 2 sacks in the ball game gives them 12. No forced fumbles keeps them at 4. 1 pass defense brings them up to 16. 48 tackles. I mentioned the 48 tackles. They had no defensive touchdowns or interceptions, but they do have 1 INT from this season. Patriots defense is allowing 298.4 yards per game, 190.4 yards passing, and 108 yards rushing. Patriots have given up a lot of points, 131 in 5 games. That's an average of 26.2 points per game. Point differential is minus 76, which is not good. Closing line was New England minus 2, over-under is 38.5. 2 teams combined to score 34 points. Well, really, all of them were scored by the same team. 460 yards in 117 plays, averaging just 3.93 yards per play. I took the Saints both straight up and ATS. All right. After getting blitzed by the Buffalo Bills last week, the Miami Dolphins are back in the win column, beating the slumping New York Football Giants 31-16. All right, the Dolphins will welcome Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers to South Beach on Sunday, while the Giants are getting their bibs ready because they're headed up to Buffalo to face the Bills on Sunday night. Miami is now 4-1 on the season. New York is 1-4. And how about the number 1 rated Dolphins offense, which was back at it again on Sunday? 53 plays for 524 yards, averaging 9.89 yards per play. 30 passes for 302, averaging 10.07 yards per pass. This is the second game this year in which Miami's passing offense averaged 10 yards per pass. Of course, back against the Denver Broncos, they averaged over 13 yards per pass in that one. Dolphins offense also had 23 rushes for 222, averaging a real cool 9.65. The Dolphins had 22 first downs and 124 through 5 games. Third down conversions, not that great. 3 of 8 for 37.5% on the season. 19 of 43 for 44.2%. No fourth down plays for Miami's offense. They stay at 2 of 7. They had 6 penalties for 43 yards and 32 through 5 games for 280. Time of possession, 24 minutes and 1 second. And again, the Dolphins offense, the number one unit in all of football at 513.6 yards per game, 327.8 passing, and 185.8 rushing. And I think they're also the highest scoring team in the NFL as well at 181 points. That's 36.2 points per game. The Giants offense ran 61 plays for 268, averaging 4.39. 32 passes for 183, averaging 5.72, and 29 rushes for 85, averaging 2.93. The Giants had 15 first downs in 82 through 5 games. They weren't that great on third down either. 5 of 17 for 29.4%. For the season, 26 of 73 for 35.6%. They went 1 for 2 on fourth down. They are now 7 of 12 on fourth down in 5 games this year. New York had 6 penalties for 43 yards, 33 total for 272. Time of possession is 35 minutes and 59 seconds. This puts the New York Giants in ball hawk territory. Giants offense in 5 games now averaging 255.2 yards per game, 163 yards passing, and 92.2 yards rushing. New York has scored only 62 points in 5 games. That's 12.4 points per game. Across the league, only the New England Patriots have scored fewer points. All right. The Miami Dolphins defense records 53 tackles, bringing them up to 234. They had 7, count them, 7 sacks on Giants quarterbacks. Whether it's Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor, they had 7 sacks. They're up to 16 through 5 games. 1 forced fumble in the game, that's their 4th. 4 passes defense brings them up to 22. They had no interceptions or touchdowns against the Giants, but they do have 2 INTs from earlier games. They've allowed 135 points, which is 27 points per game. Point differential in 5 weeks is plus 46. New York Giants defense records 37 tackles, 193 through 5 games. They had 1 sack in this game that brings them up to 5. They had 1 forced fumble going into the game. They had 2 during the game. So now they're up to 3 forced fumbles in 2023. They also added 6 passes defense, bringing them to 20. And they recorded their first 2 interceptions and their first defensive touchdown of 2023 in this game. Giants defense in 5 weeks averaging 378 yards allowed per game, 226.6 yards passing, and 151.4 yards rushing. They've given up 153 points, which is an average of 30.6 points per game. New York's point differential through 5 games is minus 91. That's terrible. Closing line is Miami minus 12.5. Over under is 48. And they just missed this total by a single point, as the 2 teams combined for 47 points, 792 yards, and 114 plays, averaging 6.95 yards per play. I took the Dolphins both straight up and against the spread and this one. And the final of the early games on Sunday saw the Indianapolis Colts defeat the Tennessee Titans 23-16 as Indianapolis ends a 5-game losing streak in the series versus Tennessee. So next up for the Colts is their annual trip to their own personal house of horrors, that being Jacksonville to face the Jaguars. They have lost 14 straight games in Jacksonville, and hopefully for the Colts, the streak ends on Sunday. Meanwhile, the Titans are headed across the pond to face the Baltimore Ravens in London. Indianapolis with the win is 3-2. Baltimore with the loss, or rather Tennessee with the loss, is 2-3. Start off with the Colts offense. 60 plays for 429, averaging 7.15 yards per play. 26 passes for 236, averaging 9.08 yards per pass. And 34 rushes for 193, averaging 5.68 yards per run. The Colts had 21 first downs, 96 through 5 games. Third down conversions, 8 of 13, 61.5%. On the season, 27 of 69, 39.1%. The Colts went 0 for 1 on fourth down, and on the season, they're now 2 of 8, which is not pretty good. Indianapolis had 8 penalties for 55 yards and 34 through 5 games for 243. Time of possession is 31 minutes, 3 seconds. Colts offense in 5 games, averaging 343.6 yards per game, 212.4 yards passing, and 131.2 yards rushing. The Titans offense runs 57 plays for 348, averaging 6.11 yards per play. 35 passes for 259, averaging 7.4 yards per pass. 22 rushes for 89 yards, averaging 4.05 yards per run. Tennessee had 19 first downs and 85 through 5 games. They were 5 of 12 on third down for 41.7%. On the season, they're 23 of 62 for 37.1%. Tennessee went 1 of 2 on fourth down, and on the season, they are now 3 of 5. The Titans committed 4 penalties for 58 yards, with 30 total through 5 games for 255. Time of possession is 28 minutes and 57 seconds. The Tennessee offense in 5 games, averaging 293.4 yards per game, 187 yards passing, and 106.4 yards rushing. They've scored 88 points in 5 weeks. Average is 17.6 points per game. The Indy defense records 36 tackles, 257 in 5 games. 1 sack on the afternoon gives them 15. No forced fumbles. They stay at 9 in that category. They added 5 more passes defense for a total of 18. 1 interception and no touchdowns. That interception on Sunday is their 3rd of the season, and they also have 1 defensive score from earlier. The Colts defense averages 382 yards allowed per game, 262.8 passing, and 119.2 rushing. They've allowed 115 points, which is 23 points a game. Point differential for Indianapolis is +5. As for the Titans defense, 44 tackles in this game, 225 through the first 5 weeks. 1 sack brings them to 14. 1 forced fumble brings them to 7. 1 pass defense brings them to 13. They had no interceptions or touchdowns defensively against the Colts, but they do have 1 INT from earlier. Titans defense allowing 334.8 yards per game, 240.2 passing, and 94.6 rushing. They've allowed 93 points, which is 18.6 points per game, I should say. Their point differential is opposite that of the Colts. It's -5. Closing line was Tennessee -2, over under 43.5. The 2 teams combined for 39 points, so they just missed the total with 777 yards of offense and 117 plays, averaging 6.64 yards per play. I picked the Colts both straight up and with the points. If you're joining me late, you're watching the week that was as I run down the statistical numbers from week 5 in the NFL. And stay tuned at the end of this recap, we'll be looking at my new power rankings for week 6. So again, stay tuned for that. Plus, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. Now back to the recap as we move to the 4 o'clock games on Sunday. First off, the Cincinnati Bengals beats the Arizona Cardinals 34-20 in a game Cincinnati desperately needed to keep their season alive. The Bengals are now 2-3. They're headed back home to face another NFC West team, Geno Smith's Seattle Seahawks. While the Arizona Cardinals, who continues to fight and fight, they dropped to 1-4, and they're off to LA to face the Rams on Sunday. Start off with the Bengals offense. 76 plays for 380 yards, averaging an even 5 yards per play. 46 passes for 287, averaging 6.24. 30 rushes for 93, averaging 3.1. The Bengals had 27 first downs, 85 through 5 games. They went 5 of 14 on third down for 35.7%. And on the season, 24 of 70 for 34.3%. They went 0 for 3 on fourth down, which makes them 2 for 7 on the season. Cincinnati had 4 penalties for 40 yards and 25 total for 179 through 5 weeks. Time of possession, 38 minutes and 10 seconds. This makes the Bengals ball hawks. The Bengals offense in 5 games averaging 264.8 yards per game, 190.2 yards per game passing, and 74.6 yards per game rushing. They've scored 83 points, averaging 16.6 points per game. Cardinals offense ran 54 plays for 294, averaging 5.44 yards per play. 32 passes for 152, averaging 4.75, and 22 rushes for 142, averaging 6.45. The Cardinals had 15 first downs and 95 through 5 games. They are 4 of 11 on third down in this one for 36.4%, and for the year, 25 of 60 for 41.7%. The Cardinals also went 0 for 3 on fourth down, and like the Bengals, the Cardinals are also 2 of 7 on fourth down this year. Arizona had just 2 penalties for 16 yards, and on the season, 36 for 319. Time of possession was 21 minutes and 50 seconds. Cardinals offense in 5 games averaging 329 yards per game, 185.8 passing, and 143.2 rushing. They've scored 108 points in 5 games, averaging 21.6 yards per game, or rather 21.6 points per game. My mistake. The Bengals defense records 31 tackles for 214 through 5 games. They would sack Josh Dobbs 3 times, bringing their total to 15. 1 forced fumble in the game is their third. 8 passes defense jumps them to 22. They had 2 interceptions, bringing their total to 6. And they also scored their first defensive touchdown. This was on a pick 6 towards the end of the first half. All right, the Bengals defense in 5 games is allowing 350.2 yards per game, 196.2 yards passing, and 154 yards rushing. They've allowed 114 points, which is 22.8 points per game. Point differential for the Bengals is minus 31. Cardinals defense records 63 tackles. They're up to 241 in 5 games. They had 3 sacks on Joe Burrow. That's 15 so far this year. and then a bunch of ones. They had one forced fumble, one pass defense, and one interception. So now they have 3 forced fumbles, 24 passes defense, and 4 interceptions in 2023. They did not have a defensive touchdown, however, but they do have one from earlier this year. Cardinals defense allowing 375.6 yards per game, 251.4 passing, and 124.2 rushing. They've allowed 136 points, which is 27.2 points per game. Their point differential is minus 28. Closing line was Cincy -3 over under 45.5. The two teams went over the total as they combined for 54 points, 674 yards, and 130 plays, averaging 5.18 yards per play. I took the Bengals both straight up and against the spread. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles remain perfect after beating the Rams in LA 23-14. All right. Their 2-game trip continues next week in the Meadowlands against the New York Jets, while LA will host the Arizona Cardinals. Philadelphia goes to 5-0, and this is the first time in franchise history that the Eagles have begun the season 5-0 in back-to-back years. The Rams, meanwhile, dropped to 2-3. Start off with the Philly offense. 77 plays for 454, averaging 5.9 yards per play. 38 passes for 295, averaging 7.76, and 39 rushes for 159, averaging 4.08. The Eagles had 28 first downs, which is a season high. They're up to 119 through 5 games. And they were really, really good on third down. How about 13 of 18 for 72.2%? And for the season, 37 of 73 for 50.7%. They went 0 for 1 on fourth down, and on the season, they're 5 for 8. So combined, they are 42 out of 81 on late down situations in 5 games of 2023. That's nearly 52%. Philadelphia had 3 penalties for 35 yards and 29 total for 230. Time of possession, 37 minutes, 55 seconds, putting the Eagles in ball hawk territory. Philly's offense in 5 games, averaging 404.4 yards per game, 240.4 yards passing, and 164 yards rushing. All right. They've scored 141 points in 5 games, which is 28.2 points per game. The Los Angeles Rams offense ran 51 plays for 249 yards, averaging 4.88. 37 passes for 195, averaging 5.27, and 14 rushes for 54, averaging 3.86. They had 17 first downs and 114 through 5 games. They finished 6 of 14 on third down, 42.9%. And on the season, 31 of 71 for 43.7%. They went 2 for 3 on third, or rather 2 for 3 on fourth down. And on the season, they are 6 for 8, which is also impressive at 75%. LA had 5 penalties for 48 yards, 30 total for 269. Time of possession, 22 minutes and 5 seconds. The Ram offense in 5 games, averaging 364 yards per game, 270 yards passing, and 94 yards rushing. They've scored 112 points, averaging 22.4 points per game. Back to the Eagles now. Their defense records 30 tackles, bringing them to 192. They would They would sack Matthew Stafford 4 times, bringing their sack total to 15. One more forced fumble in this one gives them 10 on the season. 2 passes defense ups their total to 20 with no interceptions or touchdowns. They do have 2 INTs and 1 defensive score from earlier this year. Eagles defense in 5 games allowing 308.8 yards per game, 247.6 passing, and 61.2 rushing. They've allowed 104 points, which is 20.8 points per game. Point differential is plus 37. All right, I gotta write someone real quick. Okay, got it. The Rams defense records 55 tackles, bringing them up to 191. Remain with 2. 3 passes defense, bringing them up to 15. They added their second interception of the year with 1 on Sunday and no defensive touchdowns. Rams defense has allowed 327.4 yards per game, 206.8 yards passing, and 120.6 yards rushing. They've allowed 108 points, which is 21.6 points per game. Their point margin is plus 4. Closing line was Philly minus 3.5. Over under was 50. The 2 teams combined for 37, so this game went under the total. The 2 teams also combined for 703 yards and 128 plays, averaging 5.49 yards per play. I picked Philadelphia straight up, but for some odd reason, I took the Rams plus the points. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs survive in Minnesota, taking out the Vikings 27-20. Now, Travis Kelce, the Chiefs All-Pro tight end, did suffer a low ankle sprain in this game, but was able to return. We'll keep an eye on him as the weeks go forward here. But yeah, that was a scary injury for Travis Kelce. I hope he's okay. All right, so the Chiefs, 4 straight wins after dropping the opener to the Lions. They're now 4-1, and they will host the Denver Broncos on Thursday. While the Vikings fall to 1-4, and they're off to Chicago to face a Bears team coming off their first win of 2023. Start with the Chiefs offense. 62 plays for 333, averaging 5.37. 41 passes for 266, averaging 6.49. 21 rushes for 67, averaging 3.19. The Chiefs had 21 first downs, 112 through 5. They went 9 of 15 on third down for 60%, which is pretty good. 35 of 68 so far this year, 51.5%. All right, they are still 2 for 2 on fourth down after not attempting a fourth down play on Sunday. But the Chiefs, the refs really didn't like them on Sunday. They had 10 penalties for 86 yards and 33 total for 266. Time of possession, 31 minutes and 59 seconds. All right, the Chiefs offense averaging 381 yards per game, 258 yards passing, and 123 rushing. They've scored 128 points, which is 25.6 points per game. The Vikings offense, nearly similar numbers to the Chiefs. 65 plays for 329, averaging 5.06. 47 passes for 259, averaging 5.51. And 18 rushes for 70, averaging 3.89. The Vikings had 24 first downs and 102 through 5 games. 6 of 14 on third down for 42.9% in the season, 25 of 60 for 41.7%. They were impressive. 4 of 5 on fourth down on Sunday, making them 8 for 11. 72.7% on fourth down in 5 weeks this year. Very impressive. Minnesota had 4 penalties for 51 yards, 25 total for 193. Time of possession, 28 minutes, 1 second. Vikings offense in 5 games, averaging 362.4 yards per game. 281.6 passing and 80.8 rushing. They've scored 110 points, averaging 22 points a game. Chiefs defense, 45 tackles, bringing them to an even 200. They had 3 sacks in this game, 13 on the year, 1 forced fumble, 5 on the year, 8 passes defense, brings them all the way to 24. No interceptions or touchdowns, but they do have 1 INT from earlier. Chiefs defense allowing 301.4 yards per game, 204.2 passing, and 97.2 rushing. They've allowed 80 points in 5 games. That's 16 points a game. Point differential is plus 48. Vikings defense, 45 tackles and 233 through 5 games. They had 2 sacks and 13 on the season. No forced fumbles keeps them at 7. 4 passes defense brings them up to 19. No interceptions or touchdowns in this game, but they do have 1 of each from earlier games. Vikings defense is allowing 342.4 yards per game, 240 passing, and 102.4 rushing. They've allowed 122 points to this juncture at 24.4 points per game. Point differential is minus 12 for the Vikings. Closing line is KC minus 3 over under 52.5. 2 teams combined for 47 points, 662 yards, and 127 plays, averaging 5.21 yards per play. I took the Chiefs both straight up and against the spread. The final Sunday afternoon game was the New York Jets going into Denver and outlasting the Broncos 31-21. Both teams will have tests in week 6 as they're both playing the 2 participants of Super Bowl 57. The Jets return home to host the Super Bowl runners-up, the Philadelphia Eagles, while the Broncos are off to Kansas City to face Patrick Mahomes and the reigning Super Bowl champion Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. The Jets are now 2-3, while the Broncos are 1-4. We'll start off with the Jets offense. 58 plays for 407, averaging 7.02 yards. 26 passes for 173, averaging 6.65, and 32 rushes for a season-high 234, averaging 7.31. They had 18 first downs, 73 through 5 games. Not good on third down, though. 3 of 12 for 25% on the season, 16 of 61 for 26.2%. No fourth down plays for the Jets. They stayed 3 of 4 in that category. New York had 9 penalties for 71 yards, 26 total for 167. Time of possession, 34 minutes, 36 seconds. So the Jets nearly got into ball hawk territory. Just missed out by a few seconds. The New York Jets offense averaging 283.6 yards per game through 5, 160.4 yards passing, and 123.2 yards rushing. They've scored 93 points, averaging 18.6 points per game. The Broncos offense ran 53 plays for 308, averaging 5.81 yards per play. 31 passes for 169, averaging 5.45. And 22 runs for 139, averaging 6.32, which is a good rushing average. The Broncos also had 18 first downs. This will give them 94 for the year. They were 4 of 10 on third down for 40%. on the season, 22 of 56, 39.3%. No fourth down plays for the Broncos. They stayed 2 of 3. Denver had 4 penalties for 31 yards, 37 total for 257. Time of possession, 25 minutes, 24 seconds. Broncos offense in 5 games, averaging 328.2 yards per game, 224 passing, and 104.2 rushing. They've scored 121 points, averaging 24.2 points per game. Jets defense with 35 tackles, 246 in 5 games, 4 sacks, bringing their season total to 11. They had a couple of forced fumbles, up to 4 now, and 4 passes defense, bringing them to 18. They didn't have an interception in this game, but they do have a touchdown in this one. So now they have 5 interceptions and 1 defensive touchdown in 2023. Defense overall has allowed 352.6 yards per game, 206.4 passing, and 146.2 rushing. They've allowed 105 points, averaging 21 points per game. Point differential for the Jets is -12. As for the Denver defense, 49 tackles, 227 through 5. They had 4 sacks in the game as well. That brings their season total up to 12. 3 forced fumbles for the Bronco defense. That's 5 on the season. 2 passes defense brings them to 15. They had an interception in this game, but no defensive touchdowns. Denver's defense now has 3 interceptions and 1 touchdown. Broncos defense in 5 games, allowing 450.6 yards per game. Not good. 263 yards passing and 187.6 rushing. They've allowed 181 points, which is 36.2 points per game. Their point margin is -60. Closing line was Denver -2. Over under was 42.5. Total points were 52. So this goes over the total. The 2 teams combined for 715 yards and 111 offensive plays, averaging 6.44 yards per play. I took the Jets both straight up and with the points. All right, this brings us to Sunday Night Football, where the San Francisco 49ers not only dominated the Dallas Cowboys, but exposed the Dallas Cowboys in front of a national television audience. San Francisco ends up winning this one, going away 42-10. So the Niners joined the Eagles as the 2 lone unbeatens remaining in the NFL at 5-0, but they will be tested next week as they visit the Browns in Cleveland. Meanwhile, the Cowboys lose for the second time in 3 weeks. They're 3-2. And they will face off with the LA Chargers at SoFi Stadium on Monday Night Football next week. Start off with the high-flying Niners offense. 66 plays for 421 yards, averaging 6.38 yards per play. 25 passes for 251, averaging 10.04. And 41 rushes for 170, averaging 4.14. San Francisco had 25 first downs, 124 through 5 games. They finished 6 of 11 on third down for 54.5% and 26 out of 54 on the season for 48.1%. 0 for 1 on fourth down and 2 for 3 on the year. The Niners had 6 penalties for 45 yards and 33 total for 279. Time of possession is 37 minutes and 5 seconds, which puts San Fran in ball hawk territory. Niners offense in 5 games, averaging 402.6 yards per game. 246.2 passing, and 156.4 rushing. They've scored 167 points, averaging 33.4 points per game. Meanwhile, the Dallas Cowboys offense, they just couldn't get anything going in this one. Just 45 plays for 197 yards. That's 4.38 yards per play. 26 passes for 140, averaging 5.38. And 19 rushes for 57, averaging an even 3 yards per run. Just as the Patriots had 8 first downs, the Dallas Cowboys in this game had 8 first downs. This puts them at 100 through 5 games. They were 4 for 11 on third down, 36.4%. And on the year, 36 of 73 for 49.3%. They also went 0 for 1 on fourth down in this game. And they have yet to convert a fourth down on 3 attempts this year. Dallas had 6 penalties for 60 yards, 35 flags total for 272. Time of possession, 22 minutes, 55 seconds. Cowboys offense in 5 games, averaging 327.4 yards per game. 203 yards passing and 124.4 yards rushing. They've scored 134 points, averaging 26.8 points per game. Niners defense records 33 tackles, 204 through 5 games. They had 4 sacks in this game, 13 on the season. They recorded their first fumble of the season on Sunday night, plus 6 passes defense. That's 20 on the season, and they would intercept Dak Prescott 3 times. That brings their interception total to 8, and there are no defensive touchdowns yet for this Niners defense. All right. They've allowed 266.8 yards per game across the first 5 weeks, 202.6 passing, and 64.2 rushing. They've allowed 68 points in 5 games. That's 13.6 points per game. Their point differential is plus 99, which is the best in football. Cowboys defense, 48 tackles and 190 through 5. 1 sack in the game, that's 15 on the season. 1 forced fumble, that's their 6th. 6 passes defense brings them up to 27. With no interceptions or touchdowns Sunday night against the Niners. They do have 7 INTs and 3 defensive TDs. Cowboys defense allowing 292 yards per game through the first 5 weeks. 168.6 passing and 123.4 rushing. They've allowed 83 points through 5 games. And just think, they gave up 42 points on Sunday night. They allowed 41 points total in the first 4 games. So their points per game average is now at 16.6. Their point differential is plus 51. Closing line was San Francisco minus 3.5. Over under was 45. The 2 teams combined for 52 points, 618 yards, and 111 plays, averaging 5.57 yards per play. I took the Niners straight up and the Cowboys ATS with the points. And finally, that brings us over to Monday Night Football, where the Las Vegas Raiders underperforming Green Bay Packers 17-13. All right. The Raiders will play in Week 6 at home against the New England Patriots, while the Packers are in a bye week. We'll see them again in Denver on October 22nd. Starting off with and both teams, lest I forget, they're both 2-3. Now we can talk about the Raiders offense, which ran 60 plays for 279 yards, averaging 4.65 yards per play. 31 passes for 183, averaging 5.9, and 29 rushes for 96, averaging 3.31. The Raiders had 19 first downs and 95 through 3 games. They were 5 of 13 on third down for 38.5%. On the season, they're 18 of 55 for 32.7%. They went 1 for 1 on fourth down, and on the season, a very impressive 6 of 7 for 85.7%. Vegas had 4 penalties for 28 yards, 32 through 5 games for 295. Time of possession was 32 minutes, 34 seconds. Raiders offense is averaging 281. I got to back up here. Give me just a second. I thought I got all this in. Where are they? I thought I had all this written down. Oh, wait, that's 96. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I thought I had all these numbers written down. Apparently, I did not. But I got them now, so we can continue. Okay, so like I said, the Raiders had 19 first downs. That gives them 95 through 5 games. They were 5 of 13 on third down for 38.5% and 18 of 55 for the year at 32.7%. They went 1 for 1 on fourth down, and they are very impressive this year on those fourth downs. 6 out of 7 for 85.7%. Vegas had 4 penalties for 28 yards and 32 total for 295. Time of possession was 32 minutes, 34 seconds. Raiders offense in 5 games, averaging 281.2 yards per game. 209.8 passing, and 71.4 rushing. They've scored 79 points, which is 15.8 points per game. Packers offense, 55 plays, 285 yards, 5.18 yards per play, 30 passes for 175, averaging 5.83, 25 rushes for 110, averaging 4.40, or rather 4.4. They had 18 first downs, 86 through 5 games, 4 of 12 on third down for 33.3%. 27 of 66 for the season at 40.9%. They went 1 for 1 on fourth down, and they are 4 of 8 on fourth down so far this year. Green Bay had 3 penalties for 18 yards and 34 total for 269. Time of possession is 27 minutes and 26 seconds. All right, Packers offense averaging 281.6 yards per game, and even 200 yards passing and 81.6 yards rushing. They've scored 113 points, which is 22.6 points per game. Raiders defense, 32 tackles, 212 through 5. 2 sacks in the game gives them 9. 5th straight game this year without a forced fumble. So they're now the only team in the NFL without a forced fumble. 49ers got their first one Sunday night. 4 passes defense brings them up to 17. They would intercept Jordan Love 3 times. They had 2 total interceptions going into Monday night with 3, bringing their season total to 5, and they have no defensive touchdowns. All right. Raiders defense has allowed 326.6 yards per game, 197.2 passing, and 129.4 rushing. They've allowed 114 points, averaging 22.8 points per game. Point differential is minus 35. Packers defense, 41 tackles, 245 through 5 games. 4 sacks in the game gives them 15. No forced fumbles. They made with 1. 4 passes defense brings them to 21. 1 interception in the game. That's their 4th of the year, and no defensive touchdowns. They have 1 from earlier this season. Packers defense allows 337.8 yards per game, 194.4 passing, and 143.4 rushing. They've allowed 113 points, which is 22.6 points per game. And Green Bay's point differential through 5 weeks is 0. So they've scored and allowed the same amount of points. Closing line was Vegas -1 over under 45. 2 teams fell well under that at 30 points. They combined for 564 yards and 115 plays, averaging 4.9 yards per play. I took the Packers both straight up and against the spread. 4 teams were off in week 5, including the Cleveland Browns and Los Angeles Chargers, both 2-2. And the Seattle Seahawks and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, both 3-1. So how did I do at my picks? Started the week out slow, ended the week with a loss, but overall pretty good. 10-4 in my straight up picks, and 8-6 in my ATS picks. Overall, my straight up record is 51-27, 654 winning percentage. And my ATS record overall is 39-31-8, which is a 551 win percentage. All right. Your ball hawks this week were the Falcons, Bengals, Jaguars, Saints, Giants, Eagles, and 49ers. You had 7 of them this week. The top ball hawks for week number 5, the New Orleans Saints at 39 minutes and 34 seconds. All right. As we finish things up here, let's jump into my new week 6 power rankings. And we have a new team at the bottom this week, and that's the Carolina Panthers, down 1 spot to number 32. They will play the Dolphins this week. Number 31, also down a spot, are the New York Giants. They play the Bills in Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. Down a spot as well to number 30 are the Denver Broncos. They play the Chiefs at Arrowhead on Thursday Night Football. Falling 2 spots to number 29 are the Arizona Cardinals. They face the Rams in LA this week. The Chicago Bears finally out of the cellar of my power rankings, moving up 4 spots to number 28. They will host the Minnesota Vikings. Dropping 7 spots to number 27 are the New England Patriots. They are in Vegas this week. Despite losing by 20 points, I decided to keep the Washington Commanders at 26. They will face the Falcons next week. At number 25, up 3 spots from last week, the Las Vegas Raiders. They will host New England. At number 24, with the Minnesota Vikings. They face the Bears in Chicago this week. Dropping 6 spots to number 23 are the Green Bay Packers. They're in a bye this week. Slipping 3 spots down to 22 are the Houston Texans. They will host the Saints. Up 4 spots to number 21, the New York Football Jets. This week, they host the Philadelphia Eagles. Dropping 6 spots down to number 20 are the Tennessee Titans. They will play a home game in London against the Baltimore Ravens. Down 7 spots to 19 are the LA Rams. They'll host the Cardinals. Up 4 spots to 18 are the Indianapolis Colts. They're off to Jacksonville where they'll try to snap that long losing streak there against the Jaguars. Also up 4 spots to number 17, the New Orleans Saints. They're in Houston this week. Jumping 7 spots to number 16 are the Cincinnati Bengals. They will host the Seattle Seahawks. Number 15, up 3 spots, are the Atlanta Falcons. They'll host the Commanders. Up 2 spots to number 14, heading into their bye week, are the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 13, also up 2 spots, the Cleveland Browns. They will host the 49ers. Up 1 spot to number 12 are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, home against the Detroit Lions in Week 6. Holding steady at number 11 are the Los Angeles Chargers, who will play host to the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Down 4 spots to 10 are the Baltimore Ravens. They play a road game at the Tennessee Titans in London. Down 5 spots to number 9, the Dallas Cowboys, who will play Monday night in LA against the Chargers. Up 2 spots to number 8, the Jacksonville Jaguars, hosting the Indianapolis Colts. Up 1 spot to number 7 are the Seattle Seahawks. They are in Cincinnati against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Dropping 4 spots to number 6 are the Buffalo Bills. They'll play host to the New York Football Giants on Sunday Night Football. Up 2 spots to number 5 are the Detroit Lions. They are in Tampa this week against the Bucks. Jumping 5 spots to number 4 are the Miami Dolphins. This week they host the Carolina Panthers, the league's only winless team. Holding steady at number 3 are the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who will host the Broncos on Thursday Night Football. Up 3 spots to number 2 are the Philadelphia Eagles, who will face the Jets in New York. And your number 1 team with a bullet is still the San Francisco 49ers, visiting the Browns in Cleveland this week. And that is it for Week 5 edition of the week that was, plus my Week 6 power ranking. We do this every single Wednesday, so join me next week for the Week 6 edition. I will be back tomorrow with my NFL picks, both straight up and against the spread, so I can keep the good vibes going here in Week 6. So join me tomorrow for that. In the meantime, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. Big Al signing off. Thanks for watching and enjoy the pigskin, folks. Peace out.